Alright, hello. Welcome back to Community Chronicles. This is the fourth episode. You can notice this time that there wasn't a year and a half long gap between episodes. So maybe this is
Hopefully.
showing the trend. Who knows, maybe this actually takes a year and a half to get edited, but we'll hope that this gets out. It's currently Austrian Independence Day, actually. So who knows, maybe by next year, Austrian Independence Day, this will actually come out in 2024. But anyways, as you can see, if you have the gift of vision, our guest today is going to be Fractal. Let's go
All
back
right.
to the early stages. How did Fractal get into NES Tetris?
All right. So we start. I think the summer after my ninth grade year, and I was at math camp. And I was like just like in my room. My roommate was gone. I was just like watching videos on my thing on my computer, and I see 2016 Classic Tetris World Championship Finals, and there was Jonas on the left, and then Jeff on the right. So I watched that. I remember I was rooting for Jonas, saw him lose the first game, and therefore concluded that he was the underdog. And I was like, huh, this is pretty cool. Then a year later, at the same math camp, I'm on YouTube, I'm browsing, I see 2017 Classic Tetris World Championships, Grand Finals, and it is, of course, Jonas versus Alex Kerr. And I'm like, hey, I kind of remember this. So I watched it again. And like this would be in 2018 because like the 2017 finals had already happened. This time I like start really watching it and I start really getting into like all the lore. I watched the Quaid documentary. I don't think I ever watched the Eli video, but like I sort of like become familiar with like the types of people who are there. But then I still don't actually start playing. That will have to wait until later that year when I was at a math competition, so slightly different setting this time around, and I ran into a bunch of friends that I hadn't seen in a while, and one of them mentioned that he was going to be watching the 2018 Classic Tetris World Championships on Twitch. And I was like, oh, hey, I know what that is. That's cool. So we both end up watching together, and like I think I had to like leave for dinner right before like I saw like any of the top four matches. So it was just like really big shock when I heard that like Joseph just straight up swept Jonas in the finals. It was all crazy, but I still didn't start playing until maybe a week or two later when my friend sent me a screenshots of him reaching his very first level 23. Like, huh, surely I can do this too. Surely I can beat this friend. So then I start playing. I'm like, huh, this will take no time at all. It took some time. I think I started on this like online like really bad Flash emulator with like 10 frames of lag or I don't know. And that was how I played for basically just the next year or so, for the most part.
So, as someone who watched the 2018 tournament live, you said it was kind of a shock that Joseph won. What were you actually like? How deep had you been following the scene? Were you just watching like
How
the
deep
C?
had I been following? So things that I'm remembering right now. I remember seeing the Joseph level 31 video and like thinking that that was like pretty cool. I remember he started like on like a 9 starts, so like, really scuffed. I remember seeing a comment from I think it was a Song Scout back then about 3 exciting prospects who would be going to the CTWC, and that was Joseph, Green Tea, and Svavar. So a very good prediction on his part. So like I remember like feeling the hype from that, and then just like so I knew a lot of the characters, and like my friend and I were like sort of like discussing narratives for like the entire time that we were watching. Like just sort of with like no idea like how like the game actually worked. It was really fun time. So I would say somewhat deep, but it was still quite superficial.
So you mentioned you started playing on an online Flash emulator, right? So
Yeah.
for people who don't know, if people start, you got some people who start with the full setup. They got a CRT, they got the console, they got everything. Some people start an emulator with legally acquired ROMs, emulators, as in like programs on your computer offline, you know. And
Right.
then there's something else which some people do, which is playing on an online emulator, where your inputs get sent online and then it comes back, and then I think it's pretty logical that there's going to be a lot of lag. So how was um how was initially improving in NES Tetris for that year where you
I
were just
mean,
playing
I
on that
started as a
thing?
0K. I started as a 0K player, so I didn't really know like what good lag felt like. So I kind of just like experienced it. I started out with DAS because like I was like, oh, there's no way I could hyper tap. That's not a possibility. And then like I would just like sort of like panic mesh without like really any control. Like whenever I would lose DAS, which would happen very frequently because I was due. It started. It was really slow at the beginning. Another thing to mention was that I was like on a Chromebook at a time, so like this was basically my only way to access any sort of game was just to do something online. So then, yeah, it was a lot of just bashing my head against a wall. My improvement was pretty slow for a couple of reasons. I think like insisted on like only doing 18 stars for the most part, so it would just be top out after top out after top outs with like no real like getting comfortable with actually like getting practicing with speeds I was comfortable with. Don't
So
really remember much more than that. It was all so long ago.
you were you were definitely playing for a while before joined the community. Um,
About 9 or 10 months, I
9 or 10 months, right? And up to that point, you were how far along?
my very first message in there, and this was like I had like just gotten Discord like maybe like a few days ago for the first time, and it was like the first or second server I ever joined. I was terrified to like speak to people who had like impressive PBs, like max outs. Some of them even had 1.1s. Like that was insane. And I think my first thing was when the Twitch bot started hacking PBs. So I put a message saying set PB 880,000. Yeah, that was one of my first like I feel like games that I was like really proud of because I think I went like really far, like made it to like level 27 or something ridiculous like that.
So how's the shift going from just a player who just plays, isn't part of any community, to going into this community, seeing all these players improving themselves, learning what they're doing, learning what the top players are doing, and whatnot. And how was um how was improvement from that stage onwards?
Kind of the same and also kind of really different in a lot of ways. Like first off, for like the first many months, I was terrified of just talking to people because I didn't like really been in like environments like this before, so it was kind of just awkward just to think about like where do I like start sending messages? Like, do I have anything interesting to contribute to the conversation? So on the other hand, the friends that had inspired me to play Tetris had moved on to like modern Tetris, and I was getting pretty close to his personal best. So now having a whole community of people who were better than me was like the motivation that I needed to keep going. And so I kept playing. I think I was mostly on my own for a bit, and it took maybe a few more months after that to feel good enough to start entering tournaments.
Um, yeah, your first match was I I don't think there exists any record of this video wise, but according to the ELO list, your first match was against the Asian in Tetris
Yes, and this was in
Deathmatch. In
Deathmatch.
Deathmatch, yes. Deathmatch being the show where you can just play against anybody, and it's for ELO, and yeah,
Yeah.
you pick your own opponent, right? So how did you mentioned you were nervous, but how was overcoming the nerves to get yourself
I
out there and play a
was
match?
I'm not sure if I ever did. I just might have just played while being like really shaky. I remember like for a lot of my early matches, my hands would get really cold right before playing, and it just like made no sense to me like that this was a thing that could happen, but it did. So I just run them through hot water beforehand and then just start playing. I remember I think I lost. I don't remember what the final count was, but I was pretty happy because I got some three very impressive scores, which were a 500k, a 600k, and even a 700k.
Well, to be
at
fair,
some point. I want to say it was close.
you were it went to a decider. Um, were you were a max out player then at that point?
I had a handful of maxes at the time. Yeah,
At the time, okay. Um, how was well, I mean, we might spend a minute. How was getting your first max out back then?
I was getting
Had
my
you
first
sorry,
max.
wait. Had you actually switched to the offline emulator by then?
I think I was on FCUX
Oh,
at the time. I had not discovered Messin. Yeah, which is the one that I've stuck with like ever since for like years and years now. And yeah, I think I was in the back of math class, and like I just like spent like the entire time just like playing Tetris in the back, and like the teacher was cool with it because she knew that I knew basically or I could figure out all the content easily enough, and I was quiet enough. And I think I was playing on the Dash Trainer ROM, the one with like the hearts and like the rankings of like each dash charge, and I was like my very first 650k transition ever. So I paused, and one thing about the Dash Trainer ROM is that it's like Tetris Gym, and when you pause, you can still see the board. So I could take a screenshot because I don't know, I had never really recorded anything for myself before. Then I would kept playing, and then I got like something ridiculous like 800 at like mid to high 800 into level 24. And then I think starting from level 26, I don't remember what my score was, but it was good enough that I could just line out all the way to level 28. Whereas when I got the first axe, I was taking screenshots along the way. I was like really nervous. I was pausing a lot, so like probably wasn't even valid, but like the proof standards were just different back then. And then I got it, and I was so happy, but I couldn't like be loud or anything because I was in class too. So it's just like, yeah, that's cool.
so
And then
you
that was it. And then I think they did. I think they rejected me from the max out list because my only proof was screenshots, and I just paused a lot.
I was gonna ask that if that was actually the one that you got your first max out in class, since that was the one on the list. Um,
No, no, I think the really stupid part is I think the one that actually is a recording of level 28 onwards, which was like my third max out. I don't know why they accepted it. It was like I think it was their equivalent of community acknowledgement back then, and then I got put on the list, and then I started uploading full videos or full like history viewer recordings. Even I don't think
right. So
understand it. But to tie back to where we were talking about before, my first match was with Dejan. My second match was also with Dejan, and this was in my very first tournament, which was CTM Challengers.
right, like for how long had you been aware of this entire scene actually?
I think I was very aware. I had known about CTM as something that existed before 2018 CTWC. And then that was around the time where the main Classic Tetris channel would actually upload content from the tournaments. So I would be watching that a lot. I knew who Richard was. I knew that Richard was like really good, but like always like got trolled or trolled himself at like inopportune times. I knew that like Corian was just like beating everybody. I knew that Bubble Rhapsody like won that one time that Corian didn't enter, and like no like the top four was filled with like all people that I hadn't heard of before. That was pretty cool. And I think I'd been in the server for about like 3 or 4 months before doing my first qualifiers, so I was pretty familiar with just like seeing how the system worked and like what kind of scores were like pretty good at the time.
How's your first qualifier? Because most it depends when players start. You know, they might only qualify when they're a really good player, but obviously some people start in community and then
Yeah,
work their
that
way up.
was
But you went straight to challengers, the second highest tier. So how was
yeah.
qualifying for that, and just like what were you just expecting of your first tournament?
I honestly I don't remember. I think I wanted to wait to qualify until I thought like I could make masters. So I may have been disappointed that I didn't, but at the same time I liked the idea of like needing double elimination just because I was new and could probably use the buffer at the time. Other than that, I don't even remember the score that I got, so I can't really say more than that.
Right. So in the you mentioned it's back then it was a double elimination for challengers and then futures as well. Um, and we won't spend every detail in every match, but you know, you go through, you get your revenge over the Asian, also in a
I do want to talk about this for a bit
yeah.
because I do am particularly fond of this match because he's up 2-0 at some points. Then for I think game 3, I top out at 100k and he tops out at a slightly worse 100k. And then I just got momentum for that. I won game 4, and then game 5, I mullined out to my first ever max out on stream. That felt so cool because I was like, yeah, I've made it, max out.
That's amazing that you say that, because obviously the next match that you played doesn't really go your way because you play against Adam and you get swept. So
Yeah. No, I remember after the Adam match because like I still cared about RNG. I went back through the VOD and I was looking for like really bad moments, and I found one that was like a 40 drought and then a 41 drought like very shortly after, which is honestly like still pretty bad even like by my standards right now, but it shouldn't have mattered back then. And I remember just thinking, oh wow, Adam is like a very experienced player. He knows to line out and chase down when he's doing a chase down. That's discipline. I couldn't do that, surely, because I would just be stupid.
Adam, that is a very good word to describe Adam. Yeah, he will argue with you until death that you shouldn't absolutely never ever go for any sort of Tetris when you're in a chase down situation. You can line it out. He was also around this time at his probably at his best in NTSC relative to the community. He was
Right.
winning CTL Division 1 back then, and obviously would go on to
Really?
yeah, he won Division 1 around this time. Yeah.
Oh, that's insane. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was it was a strange season. Basically it ended with Dog had already played against Quaid, and then Adam still needed to beat Quaid
Oh,
over
yeah,
two
'cause
sets.
Quaid was playing.
Yes, and then but that set never happened, and Quaid dropped out, and then the points that Dog got against him were void, and then Adam won the division.
No.
So it was kind of a scuffed way, but yeah, this was Adam at his best, and you met him again in that tournament. Obviously, in the finals, you go through a bit of a run through the losers bracket, and
Right. I think I reset him even.
um, was there
Or
actually resetting back then?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't remember. Or at least I got like a couple games on him that I was pretty happy about. Like I had like 700k or something above average
Yeah,
for back then.
you lost in a decider, yeah. So it was I very vaguely remember that match. It was close, definitely. Um,
Yeah. And I was disappointed because like it was my first tournament and I almost won it.
yeah, but you know, to the average person, probably at this time, you know, they're seeing a guy like Adam who is at his best, and then this new guy Fractal. Like to me, I'd never heard of you, and then this new guy just playing this kind of DAS, kind of hyper tapping method on his keyboard, and it
Which like
was
nobody could. I don't think anybody would like be able to tell. They probably just assumed that I was tapping. That's just tapping full.
no, I could
Yeah.
tell when you're tapping based on your facial expressions. I remember. Um,
Oh, that is brilliant.
um, or at least it felt that way. Maybe you're just making those just randomly.
No, this is. I feel this would be absolutely correct.
In 2020 now, you've made your debut onto the scene. If you played your first tournament, had a very impressive result, losing to Adam in a decider in the final. And these next few months go by. Your biggest win at this point is winning futures. Back then, which
Can I tell a
actually,
story about quick story about that
yeah,
one?
of course, go ahead.
Yeah, that was because I remember getting to the finals for that, and like it was, or like I think they did the top 4 in one day back then, and then I remember Vandy saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna give $50 to like whoever wins futures because I just decided this now and I want to." So then I got like really motivated because like if I win, like this is like getting a prize pool from a tournament, and that was such a unique like experience at the time. I remember I played against Doge, and I think I did win, of course, and I got the $50, and I was like, awesome, I can use this for CTWC, and we'll talk about CTWC later, I'm sure. But I have
Yeah,
things to say. It was a good memory. It's a good
uh,
memory.
uh, I'm sure that was a great memory because, yeah, you won futures, You also did make your Masters debut before that month, which was if you look into the record books, you might actually see what you think is an error because Fractal played in a round of 32 match in Masters. It's officially Canada's, but obviously the context is at this point in early 2020 there was still the rule of if you max out in quals, you're automatically in Masters, and of course, with a lot of takes aging badly in this community, with how good players are improving. At the time when people passed that, they didn't really, necessarily believe that it was going to get out of hand. And then slowly, we're in these months where it's starting to get out of hand, and you're having to play multiple round zero matches before you can get to the top 16 bracket. So, anyways, you play the round zero match against Grape, a Singaporean player, and then you play against Sam Finch, which I think may have been his first match ever. I'm not sure about that. And then you play against Garbage Egg, also known as Niner. How was you mentioned that Masters was something of a goal for you before. How was qualifying to your first Masters and playing these matches? Because you had something of a decent run for your first go, right?
Yeah. So my Masters qualification is really funny because it was broadcasted beforehand that this month was going to be the last one of No Max Out Left Behinds, and we were going to go out with a bang. So I'm like, people are pretty good right now. If I want to make it in, I'm pretty sure I need to do it now. And then I think either the first or second game of the qualifier, I get a score of 1,040 points. And I'm like, let's go! And then the stream got deleted before I could save that, unfortunately, which was really sad. But I just barely made it. The rest of the qual was, I think, really bad, and I didn't improve on that. But so happy because I finally made it. The great thing was grades because I think my last game I got a 985 to I think beat win in a decider, and that's really really good score, almost a comp max. Garbage Egg, I don't remember the Sam Finch match that well. I remember both of us talking about it afterwards, and he's a very chill guy. I like him. And then the Garbage Egg thing, I was pretty disappointed because I taught myself out. And then that was that. I watched the rest of it probably. Good times. And then also just one more thing about the match. This would be, I think, the first of Game Scout's CTM recaps back when he would do those monthly. And I was on the thumbnail for that. So I think for a sense that was kind of my big break when it came to my public sort of persona, identity in a sense. And there was even a guy who I knew who stumbled across the video and saw me on the thumbnail. So that was my first interaction with that, of just getting recognized in other places by people that I know. And that never, I don't get used to that. It's weird.
Great. So the other Masters event that you played, so you played two before your CTWC debut later that year, but you played in the October Masters event, which was the last one for CTWC, a notable event, and you didn't make it past round one, but I think there's a pretty good reason for that, because you played against Joseph, and you went all the way to a decider, and I feel like you may remember this match. What can you remember?
Oh, that match was awesome. Yeah, because my thing at the time was that I'm basically just qualifying in last seed every time I play, and it was, I think somebody had dropped out last minute so that I could play Joseph, and I was 15th, but for all intents and purposes that was last seed because 16th seed was given to the winner of Challengers. So I played that, and the second game is by far the best because we both make it to kill screen with low, mid to high A scores. And I beat him on kill screen by making it to level 30, and he tops out. And I don't know, I just felt really cool that I had the ability to win. And then I go next game, I think I go up 2-1. That was exciting. And then I don't know, Joseph came back. He's good.
He was good. I think how was just playing against Joseph, because the thing about him is that obviously he's most famous for 2018, 2019, what he did at CTWC and everything, but honestly, him in 2020 was it truly
He was
felt
a
like
menace.
he didn't play every month, but every month he would play, he'd win automatically. Like there, you could just
Right.
see such a clear gap between him at number one, and the second best player, and this would be there like only slowly diminishing until CTWC, obviously. But
I
how
want to
was
say
yeah?
the cold hands thing that I had when I would get really nervous hadn't happened for a while, but on that day it was real bad. So yeah, I think I might have been, I was probably console by that time too. So like I had the laptop desk, I had the setup, like I'd prepared for CTWC at the time. So I don't know. I think I just kind of played. That's the only way I can think I could justify how well I did.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it right there. Let's talk about first preparation for CTWC. Obviously, you gotta play on console. How was going from keyboard to going to console? Was it mainly just for CTWC? Was that the main thing you had in
It
mind?
was entirely for CTWC.
For entirely for CTWC. So,
Like
yeah.
I think just like as like awful as like the pandemic and its effects have been like for us in its entirety, I think without it there is no fractal161 like getting really good results at Tetris for a number of reasons, but like one of the big ones was online CTWC meant that I could participate with a really low barrier of entry. And so like when I knew that like I was like good enough to like probably make main brackets, so I signed up and then I like ordered like all the parts for Amazon. I remember my first nest that I got, the spring didn't work, so I had to shove a sock into the top in order to get the game to like actually load. It was it was good. I think in terms of actually improving a console, that happened pretty quickly. My keyboards I think have just never been good for tapping, and I think NES controllers are actually quite good. So I was able to improve pretty quickly, get used to the timing, and then like I really could never touch emulator again after that.
We get to it. We get to CTWC 2020, the first of two online events that we had during the pandemic. Um, for very obvious reasons, a very different experience to the real life tournaments.
Yeah,
But the different side to it is obviously that you've had this whole new generation of players coming in over the last year, especially during the lockdown when people are at home and want to find something to do. A lot of people are getting into NES Tetris, and all of a sudden CTWC 2020 is looking like something almost unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. So
yeah.
for you, um, how was what was CTWC like just in your mind beforehand?
In my mind beforehand, I don't know. I'll participate and just get as far in as I can. I think expectations really started forming when I had my qualifier. I did some practices, and all my practices were better than my actual one, but the actual one I think got me like 22nd or 23rd seed, and I was like, okay, that's pretty good. That's in the top half. And then I see my brackets, and I start thinking that there might be a chance for something cool.
Yeah.
So I think the main players in my brackets were basically myself, Doge, and Cheese. Now Doge I had beaten in that futures tournament that I won, and I think I had also played him in CTL and won as well. Cheese was kind of like unpredictable, but I had the sense that like he kind of trolls everything, so if I take it more seriously than him, then I might be able to beat him. So I figured, hey, maybe I do this. And then I guess it comes to like the actual tournament day, and that's where everything gets started.
So the one name that you didn't mention was obviously the Asian, who was actually the top seed of that bracket.
Oh,
Um,
you're right. Yeah, Dejin.
yeah, so it was the
Yeah,
Asian,
I was a bit scared.
but it was like from you today, like looking back on the player you were, like what do you think would have been reasonable expectations
I
for that
think
bracket?
I think my expectations were realistic. Like, I didn't assume that I would win because that's not something that you ever do. You should ever do, but like I assumed that like I had a pretty good chance given the people I was against and given what I knew that I was capable of. So yeah, I think yeah, I think I did it correctly. But I will say one factor that's really I had not considered or was remotely prepared for was just the duration of the events.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Because to give a quick summary of what actually happens on tournament day, so through the brackets, a double limb bracket, and you go through the winner's side. You get to the winner's finals, and you play against Cheese. This is already your third set in, and
Right.
would you? How was Do you think that had already started to take a toll on you then? Because obviously you lost that set, and then you went down to the losers bracket.
I think there was a really long break between when I had my second match and my third match. So that's in theory plenty of time to actually plenty of time to psych myself out mentally. And then I don't know if that was actually a factor. I think yeah, this was before like coaching rules were really like implemented in full thing. So I had been like VCing with a friend like basically the entire time, and that was a
That's
pretty big reason I think why I was able to get far.
that's funny because I had that in my notes because that really intrigued me because in the you mentioned this actually in the interview afterwards. You called him a coach, but it interests me what that means. Like obviously he was in VC with
I
you.
think I was asking him for like score differentials at times, like even though like I was already at the stage where I would rather check, I wouldn't trust anybody but myself when it comes to looking at scores. He's really just like there to just sort of like talk me through things and just like keep me calm. Same guy who got me into the game, by the way.
Um,
He's a real one.
that's shout out to him. So you lose that set against Cheese, and then yeah, how was because obviously you drop down to the losers finals. You meet Quaid.
Right.
It's
You
a
meet
it's
Kraid.
it's a cagey set. I mean, at this point, it feels like all
Yeah,
the sets
I
aren't the
just have
best.
nothing but like bad memories from that. It was just so frustrated. I felt like I was getting like really trolled by pieces. And like I think I would say that like I had definitely psyched myself out by now, and like just bad mental was really defining me. And then we get to the final match with Cheese, and then it's a reset, but like we're both like playing like really really scuffed by the time, and then I lose in the decider after that, which like kind of sucked badly, but that was also compounded by just how exhausted and frustrated I'd felt by the entire day.
Um, so obviously it's to your expectations probably what you were expecting, but how it went down, it
I
must
had
have been
wanted
disappointing.
better. I think objectively my result was fine, and like I actually forced the reset, which not many people in their top eight brackets did. So
Um, the thing is though, right? I just like to think about this because it's something I looked up, and I feel like this is something that it's one of those factors that gets so lost, just in the numbers. But when you think about it, maybe it can be something to explain such happenings. So, fractal161 made his CTWC debut in late 2020. That was his first match against Gato Boza was his 42nd competitive match ever. When you look at players like Dog or Andy or Cheese even, by the time you're at CTWC 2020, these guys have played 150 matches, 200 matches.
yeah,
They may have been in the community for as long as you have, but they were very active playing in all the CTLs, all the friendlies, all the brawls and whatnot. Um, this is actually kind of a recurring theme over your career because I think this will sound interesting. By the time Dog made his CTWC debut, he had played about the same matches as you have played today. Um,
oh, because like brawl, like league and brawl are
yeah,
just
all
like
that
in
stuff,
full.
all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
and then I think Eric's like still played like a fraction of the amount that I have too,
yeah,
because like he
so
only does masters.
it affects people differently. So um, obviously the big exception to this rule of CTWC 2020 is obviously Sam Finch, who played like maybe one match and then made it straight to the top
Right.
eight and looked amazing. But for other players, this affects people differently. So with the way I've phrased it, do you think there's anything to that? Do you think maybe there were a lot of expectations around you because people could see you're a top player, obviously, but you did lack a lot of comp experience compared to a lot of these guys. Do you think that became a factor with these losses?
It's kind of weird because I would say that like 40 matches is like I think a lot or whatever the number was is plenty to get acclimated to sort of the experience. But on the other hand, a lot of those 40 matches were probably against people who I felt that I could beat. So ultimately, I feel that the most important things are like getting lots of matches with people who are like at your level or better. So I think if we go by that metric, I had been like pretty inexperienced. Like I probably did not really know how to like really control my emotions and like play style like when I'm behind. But yeah, it's weird. I don't know if I would put much into that though.
I mean, the other side as well is you mentioned feeling fatigued, but at the time, I think the best thing you could have played to prepare yourself for any sort of event like this, a long event, was probably the Masters event, which at the time was 1 day, um, which you had
Yeah,
played twice, but in your one run, you
never
played
gotten that far.
never gotten that far exactly. Like so, in that sense, it's also not having that practice with long tournaments.
Right.
Like, do you think that was also maybe a factor?
I think that's more likely to be a factor. Yeah, it's more just like all day long events are just so brutal. Because I had also like played really long sessions before that, like spanning like several hours of just like straight playing. But it's like each game in an actual tournament just feels more important. I think you're naturally just like thinking more during that, and I do believe that affects people in like really like strange and subtle ways.
At the time, when you asked Fractal what was his playstyle, there's only one word that he would have said. There's no hyper tapping, there's no
Yeah,
gas, it's hybrid, right?
hybrid. Yeah.
Obviously, today Fractal is rolling and whatnot, but Fractal, the hybrid player, for
Oh,
as
I
long as
cared
he
so
existed,
much about that.
yeah, who was.
Because like I wanted people to know that I was using dash. Like I don't know why I want. I mean, I can kind of understand why I wanted that, but I think it's a bit silly. And I will say right now, I do think there is like some merits to like having that as information. Like I think, for example, like in the CTWC finals for 2022, like Eric was using DAS on 18 as directly as a method for like conserving stamina. And this was in a tournament where stamina was the most important factor, so maybe that's means something. And I think now hybrid is a bad choice of word because it's vague and could mean any combination of playstyles. So just like saying the playstyles itself are more important. But yeah, no, I wanted to like communicate. Like I was using DAS, and I think that it was letting me do things that I probably could not if I had just like gone full tap. I remember like going through like a lot of people's like VODs just to like prove that not everybody like uses DAS all the time as some people believed. I found that the split was about 50-50, which I thought was significant. And then I don't know. I think I just ended up letting it go eventually because playstyle is a thing. I think the scores that you set are probably what people care about more. And this was I think around the time like early 2021 then that I was beginning to set some pretty good scores.
um so specifically for Fractal, what did hybrid actually mean? Because you mentioned it can mean a lot of things, but specifically for Fractal,
Oh,
what
okay,
when
okay,
was he
okay.
dashing? When was he hyper tapping? Like, how did that mix work?
It was basically just like you dash as much as possible. And when I say dash, I mean like full blown like use dash wall charge on like every single wall, like even the one high ones. Use quick taps because I think at the time they were more consistent for me when you can, and then just like start tapping until you have a place to wall charge, and then you use dash again. Like basically, I think I just really wanted to convey that like I was using dash like as much as I like realistically could, and like only tapping in those like small moments when like at the advantage from that.
So,
So I meant that. Like I thought that dash on 18, tap on 19 was kind of silly. as an abstraction, for example, like
How would you rank Fractal, the hybrid player? How far did he get in the community? Do you think if rolling never happened and everybody just stayed the same, obviously not factoring other things like would people still play or whatever, how far do you think the Fractal, the hybrid player, would
fractal
have
hybrid.
gotten?
Uh, I think I would have been pretty good in as of like late 2021, early 2022, and then I would have started falling off because, or I don't, I feel like I could have kept up, but by that time, Alex and Moya would be blitzing everybody, and it would actually be no contest, and we'd all like So I don't know. I think I would be good, but not like that level. Maybe we'd all have learned Moya Tap if we really wanted to, like we all did with Roll. It's an interesting hypothetical.
No, actually, I saw that Moya went to CTWC DAS in Cologne, but he didn't play, I don't think. Or maybe he did, but didn't
Really?
do well.
Oh
But he
wow.
was there, and he was playing on one of the stations, just like in the other room,
His
and
technique is like he like rakes with
yeah,
like one hand now and then taps with the other thing.
no, I was just like watching him and just asking about it, and obviously I understood absolutely nothing, but I was just standing there in awe of of these revelations. So yeah, you know what could have
He's
been.
crazy.
Yeah, what could have been if rolling never came along. But let's get to that. Let's get to rolling. You'll probably have to be a crutch to me because obviously I've never rolled. I don't know what it's like to learn how to roll, and it's been quite a few years. So tell us how you were, from what I remember, a pretty early adopter, right? Or at least trying to get into
Eh.
it. But yeah,
Uh,
how was the first stages of the rolling revolution for you?
the first stages, I will define this by saying like sort of when like Cheese dropped the bombshell for the first time. And like sort of started like he like had like this list of like all the finger strategies, all like the like finger position strategies that he was using and like which ones worked best. And it just looked so ridiculously unstable to me. Just like you're holding the controller with like two fingers and just like slamming it with in the back with the other. How does that work? How do people do this? Then I saw other people take it up. I think Tega, Doge, PokeNerd were among the early ones, and like they're learning it. So maybe I try it, but it just seems so ridiculous and so inconsistent up until like the cheese 1.3 in comp. I remember. So then I said to myself, okay, I'm going to get 1.3, and then I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna start trying to learn how to roll. Then I get the 1.3, and then this is I forget to record it, and then while I'm trying to take a screenshot of the top out screen, I somehow unplug my console and just lose any record of the game. I have no idea what the last three digits of the score are. Yeah. So then I'm like really mad. So okay, I'm gonna grind like every day until I can get 1.3, and then it takes me like about 2 weeks, which is honestly like very lucky looking back on it. So then like okay, I'm gonna learn. So I start trying to roll it out. I do the foot grip thing for a beam. I don't find anything comfortable. Then I think I intermittently experiments with it throughout. This would be like March, April ish. I try out like adding like a bunch of like different like appendages. Like I put a rubber band around it for traction. I put or I put athletic tape on the top of the D-pad because athletic tape has these ridges that like I could sort of maybe stick my nail in to get like more stability. And I was just doing stuff, so there was no real consistency. I think the breakthrough happened after I took like a break for like a few months from it. I was just playing in the meantime. Then this was towards the end of summer. My family was taking a big long road trip. We were going to like go to the East Coast, explore a handful of colleges that my sister was looking at. And I brought my controller in the car, and I brought my USB adapter in the car. And then while we were driving, basically I would just do this on the level screen over and over and over again. Every combination of fingers, like every like just on the level screen, I would look at like all the spacing between them, trying to get an idea for speed. And then it just this concentrated like practice of just doing nothing but technique that I think finally made it so that I could start kind of clearing high levels. By that I mean like 19.3, 19.4. I don't remember if I got 19.5. So yeah, just I think a lot of like work in the beginning to just figure out something that was good.
Um, well, we'll talk about some of the results in a sec. But how was once you'd made this breakthrough? You know, when did you? How was deciding how to integrate this into your comp play? Because obviously you didn't
I was just like,
start of like rolling fully, right? But you kind of try to integrate in a different
right.
way, right? So how was that?
Yeah, so I had known, or my intention going in was like, oh yeah, there's no way this is gonna get anywhere near as consistent as my tapping anytime soon. So I would be practicing on the side, but I'd also be practicing a strategy where I grip switch. And I can actually start to demonstrate like how this would work right now. If, it's
Yeah,
all right.
yeah. Go
So
ahead.
yeah, so the way that I figured this would work, it's I would be tapping,
Yeah.
and then I'd go and I'd get a Tetris, and then when I get a Tetris, I'd like move this leg over here so that the thing would fall off. I think I'd try and use Das with like this hand only to like bridge the gap between it, and then I'd start go here and start rolling. It was really scuffed practice for it. I went for this achievement where I did this grip switch after every single Tetris and got it maxed out with that. And after that, I felt okay to start using this in tournaments. The very first match I did this was against Jerpy Dude in Classic Tetris League, and I did it. I actually like completed a Chasedown of like I think 50,000 in kill screen. I got like one Tetris and lined out to level 31 to do it. And I remember just Jerpy Dude just looking at the screen, going like, "What?" And then Sunny in just like his normal, just like deadpan way was like, "Okay, this is happening." And he takes the game.
Uh,
But it was still really inconsistent at the time. I think there's a lot of reasons why like you shouldn't do this.
so your 2021 goes decently well. I mean, you made the Challengers finals in that 1 month, if you remember, where Tommy won Challengers and then won Masters the next weekend.
Yeah.
But so you made the finals there, and then you had another Challengers excursion where you won every single game, went 12-0.
Bubba.
Um,
Yeah, no, I think I remember that because I think Tetris Time went like 12-1 or 12-2 the month before, and I was like, I could do better than that. And then
yeah.
it's funny because I think I lose to Tetris Time. I lost to Tetris Time like very quickly after.
Um, no, actually, this was the month after you had played Tetris Time in Masters event, where you were the number 1 seed, and Tetris Time came in as the 16 seed because he won challenges, right? Um,
Yeah.
that set didn't really go your way, so it wasn't the best set. I mean, you lost in the decider. Tetris Time actually did get a good score in the decider, but the 2 games that happened before weren't too good. Yeah, it was a reverse sweep. Um,
Oh, was it?
I think so, right? I'm not sure.
Probably, yeah.
Maybe I'm just assuming that. I could just be assuming that, maybe. Um, but anyways, the point is, right, so Fractal's rising up, but there's still bumps in the road.
The shills, yeah.
Yeah, like people still have the cheese matches in their mind. They have matches like that in their mind, like people are thinking like Fractal's a very good player, but yet to win the big titles.
Right.
But you answer the call. The big titles come in the summer.
Yeah.
And this yeah, if you said that the role switching, really grip switching thing came about like late here, so it was still mostly your hybrid play that was getting
It's
you.
actually all my hybrid related. I
Yeah.
think in the first Masters that I won, I was just right after like I moved into my new dorm, starting my first year of college. Yeah, I pulled out the grip switch once after like I think I had already won the match, and I got like something like a 6 high right or something before just immediately topping out because there was no control. And yeah, I would say that it didn't really affect anything until like I think I just fully committed to it. That's much later.
I mean, just in general, like it's not just that you're learning this new method. You're truly rising up the ranks to become one of the best players in the world with
Yeah.
all of your hybrid play. Was it just the natural progression of things, or did you think you had found something? How was Fractal getting up to the top of the scene at that time?
That's a good question, actually. I think I had been like playing pretty well. I would say like the 1.3s that I had gotten before were like signs that like I was like pretty good at going for pace. One thing that's I think I tend to go for like a lot more than other people is like good adjustments because I'm always thinking about those and just how you can make them better. And maybe at that point I learned enough to where like I could start to like get a consistent edge over people I was fighting against. But I would it's kind of hard to say like if like anything changed other than the fact that like I was just playing a lot.
Yeah, you, however it may be, you are getting up the ranks, and obviously it culminates
Yeah.
to the last two events before CTWC, which you play in. Um, you play in CTL season, what was it? I have it here somewhere. Season 15, which you win,
Yeah.
and then you also played in August Masters, which you also won the season before. You'd finished second,
Yeah.
so it was really looking like your time. Chronologically, um, we actually start with the Masters final against Sidnov. So actually, this wasn't just your first Masters title; it was your first finals, and it was your first semifinals. Um,
Right.
August Masters, what your first Masters that you won? How what can you remember from that?
I remember to not answer directly answer this question, but starts to go like something previously. I had just finished a gap year, and the great thing about the gap year is that I could spend a lot of time like just doing stuff that I wanted for myself, and that ended up being Tetris. That's maybe one reason why like my improvements might have been greater than like other contemporaries was because I had time to really spend just like seeing how far I could push this. So as the end of that, I just basically just moved in. The finals was in a temp room, like I said. And I don't know, I think it's kind of hard to remember. I just felt that like I wasn't worse than anybody at the time. That I was like able to like get enough good scores that's I would be able to win. And then I do remember that like the Sendev finals was maybe like a bit underwhelming because there were a number of like early top outs. And I remember myself not really reacting to the win.
Because the thing about this matchup in the finals, this was a Fractal versus Sitnev when neither player had ever won Masters before, right? So
I think this was Sindev's first finals too.
it may have been, right? But Sitnev at this point was also really starting to break through and make good
Yeah.
runs in Masters. And, it looked like, both of these players who maybe had struggles getting to the final line of winning the tournament are now meeting in the final, right? So it ended up being kind of, if you want to be a hater, like two players choking against each other, right? Um,
Yeah.
and generally that month as well. I mean, you did have some good games, but it wasn't exactly like a classic performance for you, in terms of that
Sure.
run. Um, it was still your first Masters event, so taking all of that into consideration, how does August Masters 2021 live inside of your memory?
Good tournament. Like it's, I think, sort of a breakthrough for me in terms of just like what I was able to win. I do think I was like a bit concerned about it because like now with what you're saying, I'm remembering that it kind of felt that like I just had really good luck that day, and it was less a factor of my skill in that regard. And I wanted just an experience that could sort of go against that. Like at some point, but that's just it's just you take what you get. It's like good luck can happen to anybody. If it happens to you, then that's like I think an equally good reason to celebrate as anything.
A couple weeks later, um, Fractal plays in the final match days of CTL season 15, and I do remember this. There's unfortunately no website where there's all the CTL scores in history. Shout out to Scout and Warframe for that, which is really cool. But anyways, I do remember you did actually play very well in that set. So Masters didn't you did win, but it didn't really go your way. But when you won CTL, it ended up coming to the final set against you with Opox, and you ended up
Novaks,
winning
yeah.
that. in pretty good fashion, from what I remember. Um, how how did winning CTL after winning Masters a few weeks beforehand feel in the fashion that you did?
I don't think I feel like CTL wins are weird because there's no like grand finals. It's kind of just like an aggregate sort of thing. So I think I knew that like I needed a certain performance to like clinch it, and I was get it. What I remember more was that this was the first time I ever played a match with both of the roommates that I still have to this day, and they were watching. They made Fractal's. Yeah, they had Fractal's biggest fan and also Rhubarb's biggest fan from a time when I played him. So they were both in chat like making shit post messages, and it was just it was fun. I really like that.
Um,
Yeah, felt good. I felt that it did, and it did feel like going into CTWC that I could go pretty far if everything came together.
of course. So I think we've arrived now. CTWC 2021. The
Pivotal moments.
the yes, the sequel to CTWC 2020. We'd learn later in more than one way. Obviously, you know, the year before going in, we talked about it. You know, you were a good player, but making top 16 was probably what you expected. Things are different this year, obviously. You've just come
This
off
year,
of,
my bracket is so good too.
yeah, you had the bracket, you had just won Masters, you just won CTL. You know, you're the everybody thinks that, you know, this player has finally made his breakthrough. You know, he's gonna go on and maybe have a real shot at winning CTWC. You
Yeah,
qualified as expected. You know, I think you were third or fourth seed. Um, and actually, before that, how was preparing for it? As in, more specifically, do you think role switching was that a thing you were kind of practicing for CTWC, or how did
yeah,
CTWC practice in general look like?
it was something I think I did was a bit stupid because I remember I got like my first 1.4 like a week before my actual match, and that was really hype. And then I got a second 1.4 after that. This was back when 1.4 was like really, really,
Yeah,
really good, like top
yeah,
three
yeah.
or top five or something crazy. And I was like, okay, no, I need to get a third one so that I can fill my leaderboard with 1.4s because that's gonna be that means I'm gonna be cool or something. And I never did that, and I wasted all this time just like doing a bunch of rolling like that, and maybe that was not what I needed to be doing before like a tournament that values consistency over people who are probably not able to get 1.4s at around this time. So there's a bit of that. But other than that, it's kind of just like playing and like trying to like play different modes. I might have like played like Drought Hack or something to warm up for that a bit, but cannot remember.
Well, I mean, okay, you can say it's a favorable bracket, but then again, you are the top seed in the bracket, so obviously you're not supposed to be
Yeah,
another top seed in the bracket, right? This is, as expected, one of the top players qualifying in, getting his own bracket, and obviously the top favorite to make it to the top eight. I think for most people watching and most spectators, they were
right.
very much expecting for you to, at the very least, make top eight. It goes to plan at first. You go through the first two rounds in sweeps, and then you get back to the winners finals. And it's not Cheese who you meet this time. It's a different player
Oh
who you
my
actually
god.
played. This was Tetris time. Uh,
I am so glad that Sidnev knocked out Tetris time so that I didn't have to face him in this 2023 possibility. I don't know what it is about this kid. I think so on the record it says like I'm like 0-3 against him or whatever, but I'm pretty sure I played him in a friendlies once. This was before Remax, and I beat him then, so I technically have that. But yeah, I don't know what happened. I think it was just like long. It was again like last year, like a long time before between the second and third match. I like probably psyched myself out. I started playing, I think, very noticeably worse in terms of like the scores and the misdrops that I was making.
you know the I I don't know if words describe can really truly do Tetris time justice. He's a very interesting kid. He's very good, very fast. Came
Very good.
about, you know,
Yeah.
in early 2020, and you know was always at that kind of high, like middle of the high level, like winning challengers
Yeah.
sometimes, getting wins over players like Fractal, in Masters sometimes, getting those upsets. And in terms of play styles, I mean, we all stack blocks, so there's not that much like personality you can show, but with him you could always just feel like he's really always trying his best and
Yeah.
very confident in his own stacking way. He fun fact about him, he for like the first year he couldn't get a capture card for some reason. So his solution was, right, obviously we all have to be stencil ready so restream scenes work. So what he decided to do was point his webcam at his TV. Like, to be fair, it's an LCD, but he's literally pointing it at his TV and then somehow trying to get the dimensions right so that it's perfectly stencil ready. And he was perfectly
He did a
stencil.
really good job of it
Yes,
too, from what I remember.
it was stencil perfect, right? You
So,
drop down to the losers bracket. You play against Mark, from Germany,
Mark.
and
Oh, there was so much chill. It's just like you said, just like the losers finals match from last year with Quaid. There was so much tilts. I really should not have made finals. There was a 500k top outs that I had, and then I waited for Mark to chase it down, and then he topped out like a bit less, which was the freebie that I needed.
but
Right. No, but then I think just by the time that it gets to Tetris time again, my mental is completely destroyed.
the what I also want to say is I remember Mark saying after you lost to Tetris time in the winners finals, because the thing is Mark, he's playing well at this point. Like, this is when he's really doing well. So he's trying to make top 16, right? So in his head, he's gonna play against Tetris time in the losers final and then lose against you in the grand finals.
Oh,
So he's writing like, God damn it, why did Tetris time beat Fractal? So in the end, you get the job done against Mark. And it's a rematch
yeah.
once again. You go through the loser side and
And
you're
then I
in
lose
the
3-2.
you lose, no, you lose 3-1.
3-1.
No,
Yeah.
you don't. Never mind. I'm sorry. I was reading the wrong thing. No, you lose 3-2. This time you don't get the bracket reset. And
Yeah.
obviously I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, obviously. I'm a very nice guy, but like in terms of biggest classic Tetris disasters that I have ever seen in my 3 years of watching the scene, over 3 years, to me, Fractal losing to Tetris time and not making top 8 was probably one of the biggest upsets, probably in history, maybe even the biggest upset that's ever happened,
Yeah.
contextually with the when you consider how big the occasion is, right?
I mean, it was so bad. It turned me European for like 5 months.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second, but you know, it we can look back now because obviously the story ends well, but
Yeah.
um that set, losing to Tetris time, obviously you'd already been playing not to your standards at this point, but having the
Right.
nail in the coffin and going out and not making top 8, you know, how
It kind of crushed me. Like for like I think about I was like I'm not gonna play Tetris until like I feel good, and then I remember I ended up feeling good like much more soon than like I accounted for. It was like a week until like I started playing again, and I think that's not a lot of time. But I think there's like this pattern where I start out extremely hot and just do really well, and then like at like sort of the first obstacle that I encounter, I kind of crumble. And I think that's like like if we just go by like these big events, that's what happened with Cheese, that's what happened with Tetris Time. Because like after that first events, like I do think there's a pretty noticeable shift in just the quality of my play and like the confidence, even if he wants to use that word.
this would be your final, you mentioned this, yes, this would be your final NTSC match for 5 months.
Happens.
And now we get to the segment I was looking forward to the most, which is our little PAL
Oh,
excursion. Actually, no, I was looking forward to all of these segments equally, but it's PAL. I don't get to talk about PAL much, but um, generally, in terms of we'll set the scene here. PAL, obviously, the different version to NTSC, where 19 goes at the highest speed. It's 50 hertz instead of 60 hertz, so it's slightly slower. It's like 12% slower or whatever. Um, and DAS is faster, therefore the 19 speed is also playable, which causes different dynamics to how the game works. Even before this point, I had known Fractal as probably the American who spent the most time on PAL in general.
Yeah.
Because Americans don't really play PAL, and it's not just. It's. Okay, you could say, yes, of course, maybe NTSC is more appealing, but it's also just due to technical limitations, such as, if you didn't know, why do Europeans play more NTSC? Well, if a European loads up a NTSC console on their CRT, there's a very good chance that it's just going to work, but probably in black and white. But it's perfectly playable. In America, it's not as easy with CRTs from everything I understand. Most will just not display PAL whatsoever, not even in black and white or anything. It just won't work. So, it's always been kind of rare to see Americans really play PAL so much, but before your colors grind and rolling on PAL 19 and everything, you'd been playing PAL for a decent amount. Like, how...
Started probably in like around like 2020-ish, because I had seen the or 2019, I guess, even before like I really joined the servers. And it was because I was on emulator, so and emulator players, it's really easy to switch between NTSC and PAL. And I watched the CTEC finals. And like I don't know, there's something about like just like drunk Europeans playing Tetris and getting hype over things that is just so infectious. It's one of the most fun tournaments, I think, even to this day, I have watched as a spectator. And then that got me to sort of try it out. I think I wanted to like be good enough to compete with Adam in terms of DAS, and this is because I was using DAS, because I can't... tapping 12 hertz is really hard. And I thought that it was like really fun, just like playing for survival, but like actually like being like kind of chill, but also kind of challenging. I like PAL. It's in this like really nice place naturally, where there's a good amount of challenge to it, with a style that doesn't like require just like extremely like aggressive button mashing in a sense, which is refreshing. It's nice. But when I moved to console, I could never go back to emulator because the difference in input lag was just really unbearable for me. So that meant that my ability to play PAL got cut off until I went to college, and I had expressed concern over not like being able to like get my full setup, including my NES and like a really bulky CRT fitting in my room. So vandweller, bless that man, graciously offered to lend me one of his AVS consoles, which is a clone that is able to just connect to monitors, has pretty good latency, even like comparable to CRTs, and I could play PAL in it. So I was like, oh. So at the time I was like, huh, I'm left with nothing to do for a while. There's not a lot of rollers who have really tried out PAL. You could probably get like do some pretty cool things with that. I might as well give it a try, just see like what kind of limits I can push. And then that's how it started, and then it snowballed from there.
So, PAL 19 DAS, one of my favorite topics. I know a
Love
guy.
PAL 19.
I know a guy who would swear to you. In fact, he would chirp your ear off about how PAL 19 is the greatest thing a DAS player can play, and it just teaches you about
I agree with this.
stacking principles, like how he would describe it as how pieces move. Learning how that works.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with Adam.
Yeah, I was talking about Adam, if that wasn't ridiculous, very obvious. But but yeah, I do you think, like, you say you agree, like, do you think PAL 19, like, how did that add to Fractal the player?
Like, I think maybe it sort of contributed to my like insistence on only lining out and playing as safe as possible when going for these like really long games, because I had the stats experience beforehand, and that's really the only thing you can do if you want to last for more than 100 lines. But other than that, I think it's just a general like appreciation and enthusiasm for it, which from my understanding is not shared with a lot of people, and I find that a bit unfortunate because I like it.
After some time, I started seeing some scores being posted by Fractal, and these were the PAL 19 world records. Started getting those, beating your score.
Yeah.
And the most important thing now is, unlike basically anybody, I don't think anybody at this point had really spent that much time rolling on PAL 19. Or like,
Nobody. I was basically I was the first.
so, and some people, the reason for that isn't just because people were stupid and didn't just take these free world records. There is an adjustment, right, between rolling on NTSC and rolling on PAL. Um, I
There's
don't know anything about rolling, so from someone who actually, is pretty decent at it, how is that switch?
it will feel like everything is slow, but you have no control. And that's because you're used to rolling at a faster input rates, and that means that you can be a bit more lazy with how you space your fingers. That like 10 hertz difference from going to 60 hertz to 50 hertz really exposes that out in the open. Because you now, in order to like get like equivalent rolls, you can go way slower, but you have to like try really hard to space them, and that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So I think just in terms of my developments with rolling, like doing PAL for a while was probably one of the best decision I could have made, because it forced me to like really learn these fundamentals and develop, I think, this very strong control over exactly when each finger is doing what down to the frame.
In terms of what people know Fractal for, obviously, I mean, we'll get to some of the other tournament wins that you're famous for in a bit, but in terms of single game achievements, I think the
Yeah.
thing that got you lots of attention from, the general community and even people from outside of the general community, is obviously your grind for getting to, I don't know what the level is, but getting to the point where you're so far in that the game displays glitched out colors.
Level 138.
138, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And you famously around this time, as you're improving with rolling on PAL, this starts to become a grind. So how did trying to go for colors originate as a goal, and how was when did you start to believe that this is something that you could get? Was it from the beginning, or you know?
No. There's no way. I just like push it as far as I can, and then I started getting like daily PBs when it came to like lines and like score. And then the breakthrough is I think I went from like either 400 or 600 to 893 lines. And that was like the 2.1 million points, which was like a world record in both like NTSC and PAL combined. Which is kind of crazy because like it was like obviously like way more capable now, but for years like there had been this association where it's the other way around because PAL 19 was unplayable. So that was a big thing, and the big thing is that 893 is like 2/3 of the way to the amount of lines you need for colors, which is 1,320. So then I start believing. Then I start playing it a bit less because I was like practicing for CTEC, and I didn't want to like be like playing long games the entire time. Also, should we talk about CTEC for a bit? Just
I mean, I was gonna get to that like eventually.
oh, okay, yeah. So then, yeah, I think about the 893 is when I started really believing and started making it a goal. And then I think after CTEC was the week of my finals, and like finals for me are just like you take them and then you have the rest of the day off. So I'm like, okay, I'm streaming it every night. It'll probably take me like a week or something given my rate of improvements, and I'm going to get colors. Final color grind, day one. It took me more than a week.
Um, actually, just one thing. I think when you mentioned that thing about getting the highest score in NTSC and in PAL, while no PAL had overtaken the highest NTSC score yet, I do remember a time in 2020 when Adam had technically reached the highest level in NES Tetris.
You're right, yeah.
And no one talked
Is this
about
the
it.
600K game?
I may have been the 600. Yeah, I think so, probably. I think it may have even been some other because he was getting some runs, and obviously the world record
You're
back
right.
then was like
You're right.
35
No,
or whatever.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's really funny to think about.
Yeah. So former.
Like he was competing with Joseph when like Joseph was topping. Like Joseph would set a PB on PAL, and then Adam would like PB on 19 again, and
Oh, yeah.
Adam won.
Yeah, Adam ended up getting that
He is
600k.
crazy.
Um, so obviously you go on this color grind. So it didn't take 7 days. How long did it take in the end? What was the final count?
Ah, I mean, I would say, I guess two and like maybe around 2 months. It was day 30 of streaming, 30 or 31 of streaming. So yeah, like easily over, probably over 100 hours, like probably like hundreds of thousands of blocks placed,
What
and all
would
that's
like from day to day? Would you just be trying to go for runs the entire time, or were you having like special like
yeah. I
just
think
runs?
I would warm up every now. Eventually I started warming up with like more aggressive play just for the heck of it. I wasn't that great back then, but then and then I would go and I would go for a long game, and I think the big most important statistic was that it's like 10 or 12 games past 1,000 lines that all ended basically due to nerfs.
But you did
Right.
eventually you did eventually break through.
Yeah.
So, I remember the day, but why don't you just tell me from your perspective? How was the day of
Yeah.
finally reaching colors, having achieved your goal?
I knew that it was a good day because I had already gone a run to 1,000 lines earlier in the stream. And that meant that I wasted all my nerfs there. Wasted, I guess. But then when I started going for a really long time, I was having a really good conversation. I was really feeling it. And then at 900 lines, I decided, okay, chat goes off. Time to focus. And then I don't know. It's just really chill up until the end. And then I get like unreasonably excited when I actually like get it, and then start like immediately like misdrop because that's how this thing works. And it felt very good. I think it's one of those things that it's really hard to replicate just the kind of, I guess, experience because one, I was streaming literally everything and streaming consistently, and lots of people were like even watching just like all the bad attempts too. Like it was a grind that lasted for a long time, so there was like I think a lot of just like talk about like when it would actually finish. And I think that kind of thing just with our culture right now is not as present. And I don't know. Maybe we should bring it back. Grinds are cool.
During this 5 month PAL excursion, the two main things that you engage in is obviously the colors grind, which you're successful with. The other big thing is obviously the European Championship, which were held after CTWC that year. And it's the biggest tournament, in theory, for the PAL version. And, it's quite rare to see Americans there. In fact, I think in the first few ones there were a couple Americans who flew over, like Vince and stuff like that. But generally, you don't really see Americans. Now, the thing is, right? Most Americans didn't even. It's never in their consideration to play in the European Championship, right? So,
Yeah.
like, how was how did Fractal, the American, end up playing in the European Championship? Because I know it was that, and also your console, which caused some things, caused some
Yeah.
discussions. So, how was
Like
deciding
my
to play
console.
for CTEC? And yeah,
I mean, I think I just signed up as soon as I learned that it was online. Kind of a no-brainer. Like I was already playing PAL. I was getting really good. I thought that like I could get like a pretty impressive win under that, and like also just like play PAL because I like PAL. And I don't think it was any more complex, anything more complex than that. And people assumed that I would win because like I was roller and nobody else was roller.
I think you'd actually played in one PAL tournament, the CTPs, the monthly ones.
Yeah,
Uh,
CTP just to warm up, and I think I won that.
Yes, you did win. I think you beat Dan in the finals. This was when. Oh, CTP. This was a little bit of a sad time when Adam and those guys were always losing because it's just whichever roller decided to enter that month would win. Um, but yeah, so you win that CTP, and to set the scene for CTEC, obviously you were the only roller, But it wasn't just you who were capable of like playing these really long marathon games, because there were two other players. There was Sidnev, who with tapping, very fast tapper. She was able to really get a lot of good runs going and was so close to maxing out. I don't know if she already had a max out at this point on PAL, but she was at the very least very close. And basically the same story for Moya, who is the German player who, it's not necessarily like a raw speed with him, but he's very fast because he has his method of Moya tapping, is what people call it, where he gets multiple inputs. I am way too stupid to explain how that works, but he does that. And you know, it's you three who are really the main favorites, but I think people did see you probably as the one guy to as the favorite. So how was playing in CTEC 2000 and 2021 from your perspective?
It was pretty fun, I think. Not much else to say. I think the first day I played against like Rocco and
Me.
I don't remember who else, like people who like
Me.
I think they were like DAS players and
Me.
not like of you.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got like the 600 or something. You got like multiple 600.
No, I think honestly, unironically, that was my best set I'd ever played, but I lost 4.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was pretty insane. To 4 or best of 7s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good time. So yeah, there was and so like I did pretty well the first day. And then the next time we played was the big grand final day. And my first match was against Poets. So I played against Poet 13 first game, and I'm down 3-0. And it's like, what is happening? Like, why am I doing this? And if we go by the pattern of like the previous 2 CTWCs, this would be like my first obstacle, and I might like flake. I'd have to go to losers, see what I could do there. But I reverse sweep him. And this is an insane confidence boost because like I reverse swept a guy who's like putting pressure on me. Like maybe I had the mental to sort of tough through it all, and then I beat Sidnev in the winners finals, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. I am here. I'm just gonna clear it out. Shouldn't be too hard, right? Right, and then I mean you're gonna ask this question next, and I'm gonna answer it. Is like Sidnev just ascends twice. It like actually like felt like I was just like watching. We were all just like sort of watching somebody like come into their own, just in terms of just consistency and like just performance and just mental fortitude, just like all coming together. And where these grand finals, I think they might have been best of 9, and I just seeing the hearts go to the other person just gradually over time just like really chipped at me. And yeah, I was defeated by the better person at the time. That's all there was to it. Because like she was also like getting like better scores than like I would get in practice, so like I was like fine with that.
So from your perspective, like, because yes, okay, this was in a lot of ways like a CTWC. It's a long event, and then eventually it's double elimination, and Fractal loses once again at the final hurdle. But from your perspective, like, do you think those same problems came about that prevented you from winning, or was it really just
Maybe
Sidnev just
it
playing
might have
better?
been fatigue, but like also I did not expect like consistent 700k 800ks each game to be going against stats. So maybe you could say it was me underestimating the people I'd be going against. I think that's a valid way to interpret it. Lots of things.
I think people who have watched up until this point, they kind of get a sense for your personality. You know, you're a very friendly guy, you're a very nice guy, and you know, just generally a positive human being. But I will say to you, obviously, coming in as the American to the European Championships, I don't think I have to really. It's a big shocker that a lot of people who were watching that, who were European, were very much intensely rooting against you. Did you actually feel any of that? Because I don't think anybody was malicious towards you or anything, but you know,
No, absolutely not.
did you feel kind of being the villain, like people were rooting on the other people to beat you?
I mean, maybe, but at the same time, it's only Twitch chats, and that is just like entirely different from like crowd pressure on an actual thing. Which I again at the time I had no experience with, so I would say I didn't really. I just wanted to win.
This was the PAL segment of the show. Because now we get back to NTSC, and I think now some might say we begin cooking. One might call it that way, because you returned to NTSC. This is in after you got in colors, so
Yeah.
early 2022 now. Um, you get back into a significant game achievement that you got right after switching over was it your first 29 max out? Um,
Yep, and third overall, it was after I lost in Masters round of 16 to Moya. I was just rage playing, and it kind of just happened.
and but did you how was just generally coming back to NTSC? Did you feel that boost coming in? Was that helpful with getting the 29 max out like so quickly right after you switched over?
Probably
How
what like it's. I think it was like it felt harder because pieces are falling faster, and like I'd have to like go a bit faster than what I was used to. But at the same time, I do feel like I improved substantially, so it was like pretty easy to start getting like pretty good scores, which were like 800k, 800k on kill screen, for example, because I don't know, I guess my mechanics were good, but it took a bit to adjust, and then I guess the really crazy stuff starts happening like pretty soon.
we're about to enter a very good period for fractal161, but over this last my god, over 90 minutes or so, um, we've gone through multiple experiences of, at least from the viewer's perspective, Fractal161, the great player, having troubles winning the big titles. Now, obviously, you'd won Masters, you'd won CTL, but there was still kind of that lingering doubt, especially after the
Yeah,
Tetris time disaster. Um, just in general, like from your perspective, because people deal with nerves, people deal with nerves to varying degrees, people do different things to get over their nerves. For you, how did it work? Like what was going wrong for you in these big matches up until this point in history?
I have no idea if I'm being honest. Maybe it could be like I'm a guy who likes to think through things, and that could like correspond to me thinking too hard. But I don't know if there's anything that I could really say other than just like I would get nervous because it's something that's meant a lot to me, and that probably meant I played worse than when I wasn't nervous. I don't think I can offer. I don't think I can really offer anything more insightful than that. But I think later when we revisit this, I might be able to say something more interesting.
How because I mean it manifests itself in different ways because you can say someone is choking, but for you generally, like what did it mean? Like were you when you were aware like, oh, I might be choking this away, like what literally would be
It
happening to
just
you in the moment?
yeah, no, it felt like oh, that's not good. And then I would be like, okay, let's play this next game, and then something would happen where I would top outs or I don't know. Yeah, no, it's kind of weird because like other than the CTWC incidents where it felt where like my like worst performance felt like extremely present and like felt really bad. Like other losses just I guess don't feel the same way. It's just like I lost that's unfortunate. And I think like I'd still like keep playing because like I do like really enjoy like playing by myself for a lot of things, and comp in some ways is secondary to that. But yeah, it's really hard for me to answer.